dimmer red light too. I mean, I don't know if it was a really bright red light. Well, then you probably can only get it so bright before it loses its frequency of red that keeps everything safe, you know. And what I did with that flashlight that I've been using, that don't count for not dilating, because what I did is I didn't want to put a red marker on the actual clear lens, so I put clear tape over the clear lens on the side of the lantern side of the flashlight, and then I colored it a couple coats with a red marker, but it's still pretty bright, and it's not really red, it's more pink. So, and I can tell that I still can see pretty good, but I can tell that my pupils are still adjusting a little bit, so it's not worth risking having a deer jump out that I can't see quick enough and then I hit it or something. You know, I'd rather have my full night vision and have more reaction time, you know. So I hope you're all okay with that until I get some decent lighting in here. And I hope that anybody that's newer to this channel that might be listening to this nighttime video, make sure to go back and to my beginning videos and look for my brick story. It's a true story and very amazing. You know, God has done amazing things in my life and shown me that He is real and He exists. And I can't really, I hope you get that experience sometime, you know. I hope you can have that experience where God just really communicates with you, where you know without a doubt, and where you'll never doubt Him again, you know. And I won't. I'll never ever doubt that God's existence again. Now I do get impatient and frustrated, wishing things were different. God's will is better, even though we want different things sometimes, you know. And I know God's will is better. When I was younger, the things I pray for, I would always say, Your will is first, you know, Lord. If it's, even though I'm praying for these things, if I'm not supposed to have them or that, you know, I know You know what's best, you know. And it's still that way, but boy, there's still sometimes I just, like lately I've been really praying for financial, you know, for asking God to please bless me financially in a big way. And He's been blessing me definitely in a bunch of small ways, keeping me going through the whole winter and stuff. You know, because I've been out of work, you know, and here I am, still surviving. And it's because of God and the people that have helped me, you know. And I can't help but think that even my subscribers that have sent me some help, I feel like they're moved because they're people of God, you know. And I sure hope so, because it's wonderful if you're people of God. You know, it's got to be. I just can't imagine it any different. Yeah. And I hope that I don't ever get copyright strikes, because I have my Christian channel playing in the background all the time. But luckily, as long as I got the heater fan going, it gets muffled out enough to where they haven't copyrighted me yet for it. And I appreciate that. It's not like I want to make a profit off of somebody's music or something. But, you know, this channel is about God and faith and stuff, so I hope that it never becomes a problem, so people can at least kind of hear that in the background, especially when I'm daydreaming and forgetting the camera's going, or off thinking hard about something, or crying and not talking or something. Glad I became a man that can talk about his emotions and not be afraid to show my emotions in front of people. You know, because my upbringing, I was still, for my grandpa and my parents, they were in the time period where men were men and they were tough and they didn't cry, and they didn't show emotion, and women and mothers were the coddlers and the lovers and the huggers, you know. Well, my stepdad, he had a different upbringing, because he was a loving guy, and he was a huggy, lovey guy, you know, and he would tell you he loves you, and he would give you a hug and stuff, you know. Now, and he was a drinker too, so, but he was a fun, lovey drunk, you know, and I shouldn't say drunk, you know, but it was an alcoholic, you know, and I know biggest part of it, it doesn't, like I say about a lot of things, it doesn't, what's the word I'm looking for, it doesn't justify it, that's the word I'm looking for, justify. It doesn't justify his drinking, but it's understandable, and that's because what he went through in Vietnam, you know, I totally understand it, you know. It doesn't justify it because it's still an excuse, you know what I mean? But he did go through so much, man. And I'm very thankful that he was able to share all that darkness with me, you know. I remember one time, I also was blessed to get to work with my stepdad a lot when he went from being an electronic engineer to going back to physical labor stuff for a while. I got to do a lot of roofing stuff with him, and then we did some moving and stuff too. Like his mom, grandma, which would be my step grandma, but I still love her like she's grandma. Her name was Lois. She was a wonderful lady too, and she was a drinker. She was a wonderful lady. I really liked her a lot. She always showed me love too. She accepted me just like my stepdad accepted me. He accepted me as his son, and he asked me that if it was okay if he called me son once we got past me being a little butthead teenager. And I said, yeah, that's okay, Dad. You can call me it. And in the beginning, I'd call him Dad sometimes, and it felt kind of funny. So sometimes I'd call him Ron, sometimes I'd call him Dad. But as time progressed, it was just Dad, you know. And by the time I was in my 20s, I didn't call him Ron anymore. I always called him Dad. So he got a good 30 years of Dad out of me, you know. And he knew that my heart was right there with him. He knew he was my dad. Not biologically, but he was my dad. Forget where I was going with that. God, he was a fun guy. And my biological dad even knew he was a good guy. He even told my stepdad told me in the bar one time when I was having a couple drinks with my dad. He said, "Yeah, that Ron, he's an all right guy." And I think he did that on purpose because that was when I was still maybe kind of butting heads with him a little bit, you know, and stuff. And maybe my mom asked my dad to talk to me or something. I don't know. But I'm glad he did, and I'm glad. And my dad didn't want to hang around my stepdad, you know. They didn't want to like be pals or nothing, but they learned to accept each other and stuff. So that was good. And then now both my mom and my stepmom, they got along just fine and dandy. Both the moms got along with my stepdad. My mom, she didn't get along with my dad so much because of the history, you know. But if they seen each other, they'd be cordial as long as he wasn't drinking or that. But she wouldn't be around when he was drinking or something. I was talking about my grandma. Stepped in my grandma. I was trying to think. I was going somewhere with that. I can't remember now. Oh yeah, we were moving. Me and Dad were moving. Dad had this little Toyota pickup that we'd do roofing in and stuff and go to roofing jobs. And then we ended up going to Grandma needed help moving some stuff. And Dad asked me if I'd come with. And I said, of course I will. So I went to mainly do a lot of the main moving then Dad helped me with some of the bigger stuff, where it took two of us, and because Dad would drink a lot, and I know it was, the Vietnam stuff, but he would try really hard. He had been in and out of treatment through the VA and stuff, and he'd try, and then he'd only make it so long and go back to drinking, and I don't know, I was just curious. I wanted to make sure that I wanted to know that I wanted him to know that I loved him and that he was a good man. And it was important that he knew that and believed it, because I'm a good judge of people, And not that I like judging people, because it says, Matthew 1st verse of 7th chapter is, judge not, lest he may be judged. But you understand what I'm saying? I get a good read on people. I can read their auras or something like that. And I got really good with my karate master too, him trying to teach me more or whatever. But it was important that Dad understood how much I loved him, and that he was a great man, and he needed to feel that for himself. So I asked him one time, I said, at that time we were moving, and I said, Dad, can I ask you a serious question? And he said, of course you can. And I said, if you don't want to answer it, if it's too personal, I understand, it's okay. And he said, no, it's okay, you can ask. And I said, do you love yourself? And he looked up, his eyes immediately looked up to the left out into the clouds. And he said, look at them clouds. And I think I must have hit it with an emotional spot, And I said, oh yeah, Dad. Look at those clouds. Boy, they sure are something. And he says, well, I'm not trying to avoid the subject. And I said, well, then don't. I said, and if you don't want to answer it, that's okay. I told you that. But you don't have to try to divert me. You can just say, I don't want to answer that. And he said, oh, it's a tough question. And it really made him think. And he said, well, I guess so. Well, I said, I sure hope so, Dad. Because you should love yourself. Because you're worth it. You're worth loving yourself. And don't ever forget that. I don't care what anybody else says. Coming from me, you should be able to love yourself. And it shouldn't be matter nobody what else says. I said, I know that you're an alcoholic and stuff, but I'm not, and I don't mean that in a bad way, Dad. I said, I know, son. I said, I understand it, Dad. I said, but I think I wanted to share that with you and ask you that because I wanted you to think about it. So that was a really tough moment for him. He got real quiet. The conversation kind of fizzled out, And then I didn't say nothing else. I let it be quiet for a while. Let him just kind of stew on it or think about it. And then we ended up talking about something else later. One time we got this job cleaning leaves out of gutters at this big townhouse complex. And we both bagged up with a bunch of garbage bags. He got on one townhouse roof, I got on the other. We had two big long ladders. And we'd go right along the edge, scooping leaves out, trying to get them all in the bag so we had less cleanup on the ground. And if it would have been laid out different, if there wasn't people's cars parked and stuff like that, we probably just would have scooped them out, threw them on the ground and raked them all up. And we didn't have blowers or nothing like that, so it was all handwork. And so he's on one roof, I'm on the other, and it was a miserable kind of a day, It wasn't like a perfect weather or nothing. You gotta remember, he's an alcoholic, and he can't be drinking on the job. If he is, he's got to be sneaky about it or something, And he couldn't quit drinking long without his hands starting to shake and stuff, So he was quite the alcoholic. Great man. Anyway, so we're cleaning. I'm over on my roof, and I'm singing and trying to tell Dad jokes, and I just kept singing. I was in a real singing mood that day. And I can't remember how he said it now, but he said, because it was tough work, and he's like, I don't understand why you're so happy. And I said, well, Dad, it ain't this work, that's for sure. He says, yeah, that's for sure. I said, but I figured, rather than being miserable about it or not and sulking, figured might as well be happy while we're working. as happy as we can be. And he paused for a minute, and I just seen, it was a great look in his eyes as he was just kind of like staring forward at his gutter. And he kind of nodded his head. He says, you know, you're right. You know? Then I just said, well, does that mean I can keep singing